Hello everyone, welcome to the second session of our 7-figure plus performance-driven influencer marketing course. In today's session, we will cover how to find the right influencers. It's a really important chapter, right? Because it's the beginning of the implementation of your influencer program. You will determine which influence to work with, which will have a big impact on your influencer success. And you already see it here, research-backed explanation on how to select the right influencers. So I think what's really important here is there's a lot of content out there on what kind of influence to work with, and it's important to dissect what really matters from the fluff, right? And that's pretty much what we do here at Influencer Hero and throughout this entire course is to lead our decisions by data, right? So I think, especially in marketing and commerce, it's important that you are creative. You come up with ideas, hypotheses, assumptions, but you need to test those, right? With data in order to make the right decisions. Just a quick note, because you're following this content on YouTube, if you complete all the 10 sessions, you will receive this certificate of completion. You can access it through the link below. The course is widely acknowledged by corporates, D2C brands, and most of the larger agencies. You can add it to your curriculum vitae, your CV, as well as your LinkedIn certificates, and this will help to propel your career. Now let's get back to the content. So let's go through the table of content of today's session. And let me quickly start with point 5 here, because it interlines with what I just mentioned about data-backed decision-making. So what we did is we made a research report, or we published a research report which goes into depth on which metrics correlate with ROI. We analyzed over 10,000 commercial influencer posts to determine which variables correlate with conversion, right? So that's what our data scientists worked on. So this will be covered in the last chapter of today's session, but let's go through it chronologically. So we will start with inbound versus outbound influencer marketing. In the second chapter, we discuss your ICP, defining your ideal customer profile. Now, I think there's no marketing course where you can skip this part of your ideal customer profiling. Now, when I studied in university, I always thought this is so obvious, and do you really have to study this? But once you work in marketing and you gain experience, you actually notice how important this part is, and specifically with influencer marketing, because from the ideal customer profile, you infer your, we call it IIP, your ideal influencer profile, right? And that's really important. This will be discussed in chapter 2. In chapter 3, we will cover the different types of influencers, because this chapter is all about selecting the right ones to work with, right? So nano, micro, macro, and all the other influencers which exist. We give it the definition and also share some strategies and challenges and benefits of working with which kinds of influencers. Then in chapter 4, we will discuss pragmatically how to actually find the influencers after you have defined which ones you want to work with or you should work with, and then also what kind of tools to use. And then, as explained, chapter 5 is the research report where we show which metrics actually correlate with conversions and ROI. So let's dive right into it. Inbound versus outbound influencer marketing. So let's start with inbound influencer marketing, or the definition. It's essentially that influencers will come to you instead of you reaching out to them, right? Typically, larger brands benefit more from this. If you're a larger brand, you benefit from large awareness within the market, and more influencers will contact you for potential partnership. If you're a smaller brand, this can be more challenging, right? Just because you get less influencers which contact you. This inbound can be through social media. From a tech perspective, you can use custom landing pages. Different software providers provide this option, including Influencer Hero, where you can just create a custom page where you can, for example, link in your footer, and affiliates and influencers, content creators can sign up basically. That will automate the process of getting your inbound influencers on board. Outbound influencer marketing is the other way around. So this is when you as a brand contact or reach out to the influencers, right? And this can be through email or DM. You can do it manually or using automation. We, throughout this course, focus primarily on automation. It is crucial if you want to build a scalable influencer channel. You cannot do your outreach manually, but the outreach will be covered in session 3. So after this session anyways. Now, quick comparison of these two, right? I think it's important. Scalability right here. So inbound, the scalability is low because you are essentially bound to the number of influencers which contact you, right? Which sign up and want to work with you. Now, again, for larger brands, this number can be larger, but still, it's not really scalable, right? Versus outbound, it's all within your control. You determine how many influencers you work with, and the scalability is higher. So this is already discussed in the second point here, control, right? Inbound is low because you are basically also bound to what kind of influence will contact you, right? Versus outbound, the control is high, right? You decide which influence you want to work with, you add them to your campaign, and you reach out to them. So the control is higher. Then major benefit actually of inbound is the management cost. It's very low, right? You don't need to work on outreach. You have influencers come to you. So it's not completely zero, but because even though with a landing page, you still have some cost involved, most likely to manage those affiliates, but it's a lot lower compared to outbound, right? Where you need a team of marketing associates or people who manage your outbound campaign, the outreach, the communication with the influence you onboard to your campaign. So yeah, those are the two differences between inbound and outbound influence marketing. Throughout this course, we will focus primarily on outbound influence marketing. And the reason is because it's important for scalability purposes, right? With inbound, it's really difficult to implement an active program. This is why outbound is what we will cover throughout this course. Let's move on to the next chapter, defining your ICP and your target audience, right? So I think most people here know what an ICP is, so I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on the definition here. But this is essentially, right, defining your customers, right, based on all their traits, right, demographics, purchase habits. You see a visual here with some examples, right? And the more detailed you do this, the better. And why this is so important, again, it's not marketing 101, how to make an ICP to sell to your customers. It's because you need a clearly defined ICP to then define your ideal influencer profile. And this is actually where this session is all about, right? Defining which influence you should be working with. And that is based on your ICP. So yeah, after you have defined all those metrics, what's then important is to create multiple IIPs. And this is something why the ICP, the customer profiling, is so important, because what we have seen by working with tens of thousands of influencers with different brands is that your ideal influencer profile can be, or the influence which performs, could be slightly different from your ideal customer influencer profiling, right? So let me give you an example, right? So, or let me take a step back and explain this more in detail. So every marketeer has an image of their ideal influencer, right? If you're working marketing for a brand, you know what kind of influencers would probably work, right? And this is good. This should be your core of the influence you should work with, but you should not avoid testing different segments as well. And now let me get to the point why the ICP then is so important. It's because your ICP is the audience you want to reach. Then you have kind of your ideal influencer profile, but then take a step back and think, okay, what kind of other types of influencers are actually reaching your ICP, right? So let me give you an example. We once had a client which was active in the kitchen segment, right? They sold kitchenware products. And I think the ideal influencer profiling was quite obvious. We said, okay, we want to work with influencers, content creators in the cooking niche, right? Quite obvious. But then what we tested is we ventured out into home and living, like home decor influencers. And then what we saw at some point is we tested out different segments. And quite funny, one segment was knitting, right? So we had quite some content creators which were creating knitting content, and they performed really well from a conversion perspective. Now, if you stick too much to your IIP, you might disregard those influencers. But if you think from an ICP perspective, you could resonate, or you can hypothesize that maybe knitting influencers are also reaching audiences which also like to cook, right? And that's something which we always recommend, right? Try and test some other segments as well, because you could be surprised that those influencers can also work really well. So yeah, this is in terms of ICP, and then defining the influencers based on your ICP. Now let's move on to the types of influencers you can work with, right? I think here there's also a lot of content on the internet, and it can be quite confusing, right? With all the different types of influencers. Now the definitions varies, right? So there's no dictionary type of definition for this. So some people say nano influencers are 1,000 to 5,000, micro are from 10,000 to 100,000, or from 20,000 to 100,000. So this varies sometimes, but what we do throughout this entire course and throughout all of our content, frankly, we have this clear definition. Okay, so nano influencers is 1,000 to 10,000, micro 10K to 100K, macro is 100K to 500,000, mega 500,000 to 1 million, and then we have celebrities, which are 1 million plus in terms of audience size, right? Now let's take a look at the cost. I think this is quite obvious. So this is just from low to high, right? The smaller the audience, the lower the cost to work with them. Then let's discuss a little bit in terms of challenges and benefits, right? And this also intertwines with the strategy you should take based on the type of influence you should be working with. So with nano influencers, right, the challenge is you have to work with a lot of them, right? So the volume is high, so the operational cost is high. And we typically recommend to do gifting and affiliate. Now, what we do for clients and what we also recommend you to do is actually to start with micros. So we just classify nanos as too small in terms of audience size, right? So the media impact will be too low. If you think about it, right, like popular people, maybe friends or people you know, can have easily more than 1,000 followers. So we don't really think those are the people who can drive significant impact. So we typically start from micro and up, right? So from micros, challenges are quite similar, right? You have to do volume, so operational cost is higher. However, the benefit is that it's often easier to negotiate the terms, right? Micros are often more open to gifting and affiliate partnerships. They are not too much on the radar yet of the larger brands, which they should actually, but most of the enterprise companies, they focus more on the larger mega or macro influencers. So micros are just easier to work with, right? And the ROI can be higher. Now the ROI question will be covered more in depth throughout the research report because I cannot answer that in one sentence. But in terms of strategy, so for micros and nanos, we recommend gifting and affiliate, right? So remember, what we discussed in the first session, right? Gifting affiliate, you want to determine the data before you allocate large budgets, right? So macro influencers then a bit bigger, 100K to 500,000. Now here it becomes a little bit more challenging to work with affiliate and gifting. Some managers, or actually quite some managers, will be involved here. So a lot of influencers have their talent agents, which make it difficult to negotiate. Now, this doesn't mean it's not possible. We will cover this in depth in session 4, where negotiation and campaign management will be discussed, how to deal with talent management agencies and managers in general to negotiate terms. But here it becomes a bit more challenging, but not impossible, right? And we have worked over 10,000 probably over 10,000 influencers, like macro influencers in an affiliate and gifting capacity, right? So it is definitely possible. It's just a little bit more challenging and you need to have a good communication strategy in place, which we will discuss throughout this course. Now, what you can do, however, with macros is to work with a product seeding campaign. Now, what is a product seeding campaign? It's when you don't make an obligation to post, right? So you offer a free product without the obligation to post. Now, what we still recommend is actually to first try to get them to agree to a post because otherwise the media impact is lower. And then when they decline, you might offer a product seeding, so without obligation to post. Or if your budget is larger and you can play the longer game, you can also just straightforward go for a product seeding campaign. I think the benefit of a product seeding campaign, again, the difference between gifting and affiliate is that you offer a product for free, but you don't make an obligation to post. And gifting and affiliate, you ask for a post and exchange, right? And I think the benefit of product seeding, and especially with macros, is if, again, your product has an organic product placement advantage. So we discussed this in session 1. Just another example, again, let's say your brand is selling watches or jewelry, right? And if the influencer likes your product, they will wear it, right? And the influencer is in the content all the time. Your watch gets organic exposure whenever she wears or he wears the watch or the jewelry. And in that case, product seeding can be beneficial, right? Another thing real quick here, will also be discussed in campaign management, but you typically want to allocate a slightly larger budget for macros, right? Not too large because you still don't know the data. You don't know which ones will sell, but maybe you say to your team, hey, for macros, you can actually offer, for example, 3 products instead of 1, right? Or maybe small fixed payments with some CPM calculations, which we won't cover in today's sessions. But yeah, increase your budget a little bit for those macros. Then we have mega influencers, right? $500,000 to 1 million. Now here it becomes almost impossible to work on the affiliate and gifting capacity. Not impossible. So we had some cases where we worked with, we were able to work with them, but here typically larger agencies are involved. The influencers, they get a lot of attention, so larger budgets will be allocated here, and it becomes more difficult, right? So fixed payments will be the strategy here. Celebrities, same story, 1 million plus, right? So cost is very high. This will be fixed payments as well, and can be typically in the tens of thousands of dollars to work with them. So throughout this course, we will focus primarily on micro, macro, and a little bit of mega. But micro macro is really the sweet spot for performance-driven influencer programs and campaigns, which is the core focus of this course. Then, how to actually find the right influence for your brand and which tools to use. Now, this is really the pragmatical implementation. Now, in the previous step, we discussed about the ICP, right? What's important here is that you take all the information you gathered about your ICP to determine your IIP, your ideal influencer profile, and then take all of that information combined in order to then find the influencers you want to actually work with. Now, we highly recommend to use software here. You can do this manually, but this takes a lot of time, right? So you will be wasting a lot of time while your competition using software and is a lot faster. And also you don't have the data you need, right? On social media, you can access some of the data, but not all the information you need for decision making. So in this example, we will show you how to do it in the Influencer Hero platform. Now, there are other vendors out there. Just make sure that they have a comprehensive database, right? So here you can select Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok. And what you can see here is that we have 125 or more than 125 million influencers on Instagram. All existing influencers on the globe are in this database, and you can use detailed filters to find the ones you want to work with. Right? You want to make sure to use a comprehensive database. Then we will just show, or I will just show some of the filters here, which are important for your decision making. We won't go through all of them because there are a lot of detailed filters, but obviously what's important is location, right? So let's say you will be running a campaign in the US. You type in the US on the influencer location. This is important because, well, obviously, if you are doing a campaign in the US, you also have to send a product to the influencer if you are a physical product e-commerce. In that case, you want the influence to be in the US, right? So here you can see we have over 3.4 million influencers in the US. Then what's very important as well is the audience, right? So you can say, for example, you want that more than 70% or more than 50% of the followers of the influencers are based in the US. Now, what you can see here, it drops to 2.4 million. So still a huge pool, right? And then you can go in as much depth as you like. So gender and age are typically demographics which are important to use, right? So again, influencer or the audience with a percentage. And then what's typically most important is your content niche, right? So how we do it here is using a lookalike. Now you can use keywords and search by topic to do this, but the lookalike is definitely the easiest way to quickly find relevant influencers for your brand. So let me show you a quick example. Let's say you are in the pet niche, right? So you're selling pet products and you want to work with pet influencers. Now this is an example profile. They're geared towards golden retriever. What you do is you simply copy the handle here and then you will enter it into the lookalike filter, and then the AI will find similar profiles for you, right? So this is super easy and it just takes a few seconds, and then you have a huge list of potential influencers you could work with, which are in the pet niche. Right, so let's take a quick look. We have 10,000 influencers here. And if you look at the profile pictures, these are all pet and dog influencers, right? And even better, the AI also recognizes, with this one as an exception, the type of dog, right? So it sees it's a golden retriever, or please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not saying it correctly, but essentially the type of dog, right? They're very similar. So that happens also with fashion or any other niche you're in. It looks for similar profiles, and that's what makes the LLA so powerful. Now what we then have is detailed reports. You can access them here. So what you can see here is a lot more data on the influencer, right? You can see the fake followers, which is an important metric to look at. Audience demographics down here in the location. You can also check popular and even sponsored posts. You can check which other brands they might have worked with. This is all available and you should use this information, right, to decide which influencers to work with. Now, one other thing is the Influencer Hero Magic filter. This we highly recommend. This is a conversion enhancing filter. And actually in the last chapter of this course, I will explain in a bit what we did in our research, but we essentially were able to identify which metrics correlate with conversion. We blended it into this filter, right? So you can layer over this additional filter and it will narrow down and it will essentially increase the chance of working with influencers which perform based on conversions, right? So that's something we recommend to use as well. Then let's move into what's really important in selecting the right influencers, right? Which are the metrics to look at, and specifically which metrics correlate with ROI and conversions. Because I think that's what most of our clients and most of the people we work with are eventually looking for, right? ROI. And there's so many, also here, there's so many information out there, but most of it is not data backed, right? And we were always curious from, hey, why is there actually not real data-backed research on this? So this is why we actually did that research. And the 5 key metrics which showed strong correlation with ROI is audience growth rate, so how much the audience or followers of the influencer are growing, engagement rate, audience size, audience credibility, which are fake followers, and verified accounts. Now we'll cover one by one throughout explaining the research report. Just real quick, regarding the research report, what did we do? So we analyzed over 10,000 commercial influencer posts to determine the correlation with ROI. So our data scientists, they took all the data of all the influencers we worked with and the performance of those 10,000, I think we were 10,300 posts or something, to determine the correlation, right? And the objective again here was to identify which metrics correlate with ROI, because we were really interested, right? I mean, there's so many different metrics, and we just wanted to pinpoint finally, okay, what actually matters, right, in order to help our clients. So throughout the research and actually throughout this course, we always segment, right, as discussed in session 1, based on performance. So we have these 3 layers: low performers, less than 3 conversions; medium performers, 3 to 9 conversions; and high performers, 10 conversions and up, right? So that's what we did. The data is from different industries, which you can see on the right, but let's dive right in. So the first variable which had actually the strongest correlation with conversion is audience growth rate. So what's the audience growth rate? It is eventually how much the influencer is growing in terms of size, right? In terms of follower size. And what you can see here, very interesting, the HPs had a 3.2% average growth rate. So they were growing by 3.2%. Medium performers, only 1%. And the low performers were actually declining in audience size, right? So minus 0.1%. So I think this really shows a strong indicator of how this impacts ROI, right? And if you think about it, this also makes sense, right? I mean, audience growth, social media platforms, they tend to, or not tend to, their main objective is to reward high quality content, right? The more people see high quality content, the more valuable these social media platforms are. Now, there are different things which might also correlate with this, right? Because if you think about it, the engagement rate, like the higher the engagement, the higher the reach, the higher the audience growth as well. But yeah, if you just look at this as an isolated metric, it correlates with ROI. And I think, yeah, it's quite obvious. The higher the quality of the content, the more engagement, the bigger the impact of that media, right? And thus it performs, or it correlates with conversion. Yeah. So, one other benefit, this is also interesting, is working with fast-growing influencers, right? That you ride the wave of working with those influencers. So you start at a smaller size where the cost might be lower, right? You can build that relationship in an early stage, and the influence get bigger and bigger. Your reach goes up, but they will still work with you because you work with them in the early days, right? So that's another benefit of riding a wave of like fast growing influencers. So yeah, this is a really important one. The next metric, engagement rate. So this is probably the most obvious, or the ones which is mentioned the most, right? Engagement rate. We always look at the engagement rate. Now, we at Influence Hero we're just curious because there was so much discussions about, okay, engagement rate is the go-to metric, but we couldn't find any data-backed research on this, right? So we really wanted to find something to say, okay, it actually matters. And it does. So here on the left, you can see the engagement rate. So the HPs had an average 1.2% engagement rate. The MPs is 0.8%, and general performers or low performers 0.7%, right? So you can see actually it matters. And what is important, I think, is it's not that high, right? The HPs had an average 1.2% engagement rate. So they don't have to have a 4% plus engagement rate, right? It can be a bit lower. But yeah, obviously the higher the better. But yeah, here you can see it does impact. On the right, we have engagements. So this is total engagements, also correlates, but this is a bit out of context because engagements, like total engagements, you look at the total engagements in an absolute sense, and it doesn't take the size of the influencer or the audience size into account. So maybe the underlying metric is the audience size instead of total engagements, right? This, I think, also makes sense. Like the triggers or the social media platforms are built to use triggers to determine the reach, right? The more likes and comments a content piece gets, the higher the reach. So the higher engagement, the more people you reach, the higher the impact, the media impact as well. So I think this makes sense. We just wanted to make it data-backed and show you that it actually matters. Audience size. So this is the whole discussion between micro versus macro influencers. Smaller influencers are better than larger influencers. Now, based on the data, size does matter. The HPs had an average audience size of 119,000, right? So these are macros. And the MPs and the GPs were mostly on average micros. So larger audience tend to perform better. This just makes sense, right? If you think about it, the media impact is bigger because the reach is higher, right? The more followers, the more people you can reach per influencers. Now, this doesn't mean, however, that macros lead to higher ROI, because macros tend to be more expensive, right? So for one macro, you can probably work with a few or multiple micro influencers, which in terms of total impact could be higher than a macro, right? So this discussion goes back and forth. Now, frankly, we have seen different things with different clients. So some clients, we've seen patterns where smaller influencers work better, so we double down on that, and others where larger influencers work better. So you need to test a little bit on that. Just make sure that you have a decent batch of data, right? Because this also can be a coincidence, right? Maybe one macro influencer performs really, really well, but that doesn't mean that that's always the case, right? So take that with a grain of salt. But overall, if you look at data, yes, there is a correlation between audience size and conversion. Fake followers, I think this is also quite obvious, right? Audience credibility, the more fake followers, the lower the performance. And we can also see that here, 78.5% audience credibility, right? So basically the number or the percentage of fake followers is the lowest compared to the MPs and GPs. So also a strong correlation here. So I don't think I need to explain this too much. It just makes sense, right? If influencers buy fake followers, those are not the audience which will consume or purchase your products. So make sure to avoid that. There are different tools out there, also free tools. We have a free fake follower check tool, which I can quickly show right here. Just Google fake follower check and you will be able to find it, or fake follower check Influencer Hero, and you will find our tool here in Google. And we have a lot of data here, right? So I can show a quick example. Let's type in influencer here, The Rock, and then we quickly need to do this CAPTCHA. This doesn't always happen. Just in some cases, we ask to get the CAPTCHA. Now, here what you can see is a lot of data. We show the engagement rate, the growth rate. You see how the audience evolved over time, the fake follower percentage, audience location, audience gender, right, male and female, the split, audience age, as well as estimated returns and EMV. So we show a lot of data. This is completely for free. You can use it. You can create a personalized sentence as well. So here it says, Dwayne, your heartfelt celebration in Mona 2 really resonate with me, and those daddy-daughter moments are just the sweetest. So this is something really interesting. The AI, or our AI, looks at the last post on influencer on the influencer grid and then personalizes this sentence. And we will actually use that in our outbound motion to personalize each email, which we'll cover in the next session actually. But here you can use it for free, copy paste it if you want to reach out to an influencer. Yeah, you can use this tool. Here you can also access a free Chrome audit extension. This is quite helpful if you're just browsing influencers, right? So if you need to work with influencers, you need to quickly analyze them, just click on the browser extension. I will link the link to the Chrome extension as well as to the tool in the description below in this course. But here you can basically access the same data, but more conveniently throughout a Chrome extension, right? So if you're on a profile, just quickly click here. And if you're using Influencer Hero, so if you're a user, you can have more capabilities. So you can add influencers to your CRM directly through the Chrome extension. But if you're not a user yet, you can just use this for free as well, right? So really useful tools. And yeah, so that's fake followers. Then the last metric, which is quite surprising actually from all the metrics we analyzed. So we analyzed hundreds of metrics, right? And these are the 5 which had the strongest correlation or which really matter. Verified accounts, which was one which is quite surprising. I didn't expect it, but it showed a strong correlation. So verified accounts are just a blue check mark, right, on Instagram, which influencers have. And what we can see here is that HPs had a 61% verified account. So 61% had a blue check mark, MPs 34%, and the low performers 26%, right? So now here it's important, right? Correlation doesn't imply causation. You don't know if the verified accounts are actually leading to higher conversions, because what could be the case is that the underlying factor is audience size, because larger influencers tend to have more verified accounts. And we saw in the previous here audience size, right? They tend to perform better. So maybe that's the underlying metric which actually influences conversion. We don't know, but just take that into account, right? It doesn't hurt to take that into account in your search and use it as well. So did I miss anything here? That's pretty much it. So these are the 5 metrics. What we did within our influencer search of Influencer Hero is we offer a filter called Influencer Magic, where we merged all these metrics into one blended filter, which you can basically layer over your influencers. So once you've selected all the filters on location, audience, demographics, and all those things, you can layer over this Influencer Hero Magic filter, and it will basically narrow it down based on all these metrics to give you a list of the ones which are more likely to perform when it comes to conversion. This is pretty much it. We covered everything from how to find the right influencers to which tools to use, and then the research report. I will also link the full research report in the description so you can access it as well. That's pretty much it for today. Next week, we will cover influencer outreach, really important, where we share templates, where we explain in detail how to set up your communication strategy in order to maximize your response rates. Yeah, see you next week.